Thank you. Thank you all very much for coming out on a beautiful Sunday morning to do something very, very radical. You ready for radical activity? We're going to practice democracy. How's that? Let me begin by taking off my jacket. That's all right. Let me thank Melanie for her kind introduction, and let me thank Sean, who is with the Sheet Metal Workers Union. What Sean understands and what I understand is that we do not grow the middle class of this country without a strong trade union movement, and I am pledged to do everything that I can to make sure that happens. And let me thank Jeff. Jeff is one of the millions of unsung heroes who every day goes to work as a teacher. And I know we talk a lot about the great football players and the great basketball and baseball players of this country. We pay them huge amounts of money. You know what? We do not pay enough attention, and we do not thank people like Jeff for the work that they do. We announced our candidacy 4.5 months ago, and when I announced it, folks were very polite and very nice, but nobody thought we had a chance to do anything. But a lot has happened in the last 4.5 months. And I think the reason for that is that the issues that we are talking about are issues that are resonating with the American people. Needless to say, having gone all over this country and talked to a zillion people, you know, I hear a lot of remarks, and people are very kind and generous. But there's one remark that stays in my mind is a young man, I think we're out in the West Coast, and he came up to me and he said, "Bernie, thank you. You are treating us like we are intelligent human beings." And So, you know, what a lot of politics passes for in this day and age, and encouraged by the media, unfortunately, is a game of calling people names and attacking people every day. And, you know, if I trip leaving the stage, it will be a front page story. The picture of me being face down on the ground. Or if I were to start viciously attacking Hillary Clinton, it would be all over the front pages of the paper. But I don't do that. I don't do that because I think that as a nation, we've got a lot of work in front of us in order to focus on the most important issues facing our country. And what democracy is about is laying those issues on the table, understanding that honest people can differ with us, have different points of view, but debating those issues and seeing how we go forward in order to resolve them. It ain't more complicated than that, and that's what I have been trying to do in this campaign. So the campaign is not about how I am standing in the polls, although thank you, New Hampshire, we're doing pretty well here. But you know, but polls go up and polls go down, or whether it's Iowa or any place else. The real issue is, and let me take it a step further, it's not whether I win or not. It's whether we transform America in the direction that we think it needs to go. So let me just start off by telling you something that I have full confidence that no other presidential candidate will tell you. And this is sometimes hard for people to grasp or to feel good about, but it is the simple truth. If Bernie Sanders, it doesn't matter in a certain sense who is elected president unless there is a political revolution in this country of many, many millions of people who are coming together, standing up and saying loudly and clearly, enough is enough. And I'm beginning to hear that all over this country, people saying, wait a second, you know, this country belongs to all of us and not just to a handful of billionaires who can make huge campaign contributions. Now, the point that I make is that no president, not Bernie Sanders or anybody else, can do it alone, is because of the following reasons. Wall Street, corporate America, the Koch brothers, huge campaign contributors have enormous power. And if you think that any president, you send me to the Oval Office, you think I can say to Wall Street, well, guys, I think it's important that you start paying a tax on Wall Street speculation so that all of our kids will have the opportunity to go to public colleges and universities tuition-free. And they're going to say, hey, damn it, Bernie, that's a great idea. Why didn't we think of that? You got it, man. We're going to spend millions lobbying to make sure that we have a tax on Wall Street speculation. And when I go to corporate America and I say, hey, guys, you know, maybe it's a good idea that you not continue to shut down manufacturing plants in New Hampshire and Vermont and all over this country and send our jobs to low-wage countries abroad. And they say, why didn't we think of that, Bernie? Fantastic idea. That's what we'll do tomorrow. It doesn't happen like that. It doesn't happen like that. As everybody in this room knows, the only way that real change takes place is when millions of people at the grassroots level come together and fight back. You know, the fact that we have an African American as president of the United States today, it didn't occur just because Barack Obama was a very strong and good candidate. It occurred because for 100 years, African Americans and their white allies fought courageously, and some died in the struggle to say, we will end racism in the United States of America. That's how it happened. Obviously, we still have a long way to go in combating racism, but that's how progress is made. We have made enormous steps forward in terms of fighting sexism in this country because women for over 100 years have stood up with their male allies and say, we are not going to judge people based on their gender. We're going to try to break down sexism in America and give all of our people equal opportunity. Didn't happen because we had a couple of good senators. It happened because millions of people said, enough is enough. America is not about sexist policies. And if you look at what has happened, and I'm not talking about 40, 50, 100 years ago. If you look at what's happened in terms of gay rights in America in the last 10 years, it is extraordinary. And that happened because people in the gay community stood up, they got arrested, they got beaten, and they worked with their straight allies and said, hey, in the United States of America, we're going to judge people on their character and not based on their sexual orientation. We've made huge progress in that area. So my point is that if you look at history in general, American history, world history, that is how change takes place. So what this campaign is about, kind of uniquely, yeah, of course, I'm here today to ask for your support in the New Hampshire primary. Yes, I'm here to ask for your support to help me win the Democratic nomination, and I'm asking for your support to help me make me President of the United States. But what I am also asking you is to be with me not just before the election, you've got to be with me the day after the election. And that is because no president can do it alone. The powers that be are just too powerful. But at the end of the day, when millions of people stand up and fight back, we win. Because while they may have the money, they may have the power, we have the people. And when people stand together, we win. Now, what I'd like to do is to take a few minutes, well, actually longer than a few minutes, to go over some of the issues that, to my mind, are the issues that are on the minds of the American people. Then we'll stop, we'll take your questions and your comments. To my mind, it is important for all of us to understand that we live in the wealthiest nation in the history of the world. That's where we are today. Most people don't know that. Why don't they know that? Well, they're too busy working 2 or 3 jobs. They're too busy being one of the 45 million people living in poverty to really know that. They don't know it because almost all of the new income and wealth being created is going to the top 1%. Now, income and wealth inequality is an issue that can no longer be shoved underneath the rug. It's got to be brought out into the open, and together we are going to address this issue. And here is the simple truth. The United States today has more income and wealth inequality than any other major industrialized nation on earth, and it is worse today in America than at any time since 1928. In America today, the top 1/10 of 1%, not 1%, 1/10 of 1% owns almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%. In America today, 58% of all new income being created. You got people working crazy hours, long jobs, working 7 days a week. 58% of all new income created is going to the top 1%. In America today, you got one family, the Walton family of Walmart, owning more wealth than the bottom 40% of the American people. In my view, that is a rigged economy, not an economy that works for American workers. It has got to change. And this campaign is sending a message to the billionaire class. It's a simple message. It is a straightforward message, and that is, you cannot have it all. You are not going to continue to get huge tax breaks when children in America are going hungry. You cannot continue to send our jobs to China and other low-wage countries when millions of Americans desperately need decent-paying jobs. You are not going to continue to give the CEOs of large corporations huge compensation packages at the same time as you cut the wages and the health care benefits and the pensions of your employees. Your greed is going to end, and we're going to end it for you. But it is not only the grotesque level of income and wealth inequality that we have got to address. There is another economic reality out there. And again, we've got to put these issues on the table, because if we're not discussing them, we're not going to resolve them. And here's the issue. I think everybody who is fair-minded understands that the economy today is far, far better than it was when George Bush left office. All right, that's a fact. I saw the Republican debate painfully for 3 hours. And it was really quite amazing to me, the kind of amnesia these guys have. Every problem in the world, it's too hot, it's too cold, it's raining, it's not raining, it's all Barack Obama's fault. Unbelievable. I never knew that one person had so much power to cause so many problems. They seem to have forgotten. I don't know why it is. Maybe they suffer short-term amnesia. I don't know what it is. Seem to have forgotten that when Obama came into office, we were losing 800,000 jobs a month. 800,000 jobs. And these guys are saying, well, yeah, we're growing 175,000 jobs a month. Not enough. Yeah, it's true. It is not enough. But it's a hell of a lot better than losing 800,000 jobs a month. Oh, and these guys worry about the deficit. Serious issue. But they forgot to tell us, I just don't know why they forgot it, that when Bush left office, we had the largest deficit in the history of the country, $1.4 trillion, much lower today than it was then. Forgot to tell us that when Bush left office, after all of the trickle-down economics, after all of the deregulation, the American and world's financial system was on the verge of collapse. And economists were worried that you're going to stick your credit card into an ATM machine and nothing would come out. That is the economy that Obama inherited, and we should not forget that. But let's also be honest and acknowledge that for the last 40 years, 40 years, under Republican leadership and Democratic leadership, what we have seen in this country is the disappearance of the American middle class. Now, young people don't know that because they live in the world today. They don't see the long picture. But many of us who are older do. And what we know today is that median family income is almost $5,000 less than it was in 1999. We know that male workers, the guy right in the middle of the economy, is making some $700 less in inflation-adjusted income than he was 42 years ago. Women are making $1,300 less today than they made in 2007. So the question that we have to ask ourselves is, how does it happen when you have an explosion of technology which makes every worker in America more productive, that despite all of that, people are working longer hours for lower wages? And my answer is that we are going to create an economy not designed to make the rich richer, but to expand the middle class. See, I started off with a jacket, got rid of that. Sleeves are going up, probably take my shirt off in a few minutes, and it'll be quite the show here. Nah, I don't want to do that. I don't want to embarrass the other guys here. It wouldn't be a good thing to do. Let me talk about another issue that doesn't get the kind of full discussion that it deserves, and that is the issue of unemployment. Now, when every month the government comes out with a bunch of statistics on unemployment, the one you mostly see in your newspaper is official unemployment, official. That's about 5.1% nationally. Who knows what's wrong with the official unemployment. Where is that inadequate? Any guesses? Good. It doesn't count people who have given up work, looking for work in high unemployment areas, and it doesn't include the many millions of people who are working part-time when they want to work full-time, and there are a whole lot of people out there in that category. If you add all of that together, what is called real unemployment in America is in fact over 10%. So we got a real jobs problem in America. Now the second point, which we don't talk about at all, and I'm trying to push discussion on it, not getting so much help from the media here, and that is youth unemployment. Now, about 6 weeks ago, I asked the Economic Policy Institute to do a study for me. And this is what they came back with regarding youth unemployment. If a kid in America graduated high school, this is not a dropout, kid who graduated high school between the ages of 17 and 20 today, if that kid is white, the real unemployment rate is 33%. Kid is Hispanic, 36%. Kid is African American, 51%. Okay? So in other words, for high school graduates all over this country, we have turned our backs on kids who want to stand up on their own 2 feet, want to go out, get a job, make some money, leave their home, become adults. And we're saying, sorry, there are no jobs for many of you. And then let me segue to another issue of enormous consequence that we also don't talk enough about. I hope every person in this room knows that we have more people in jail than any other country on earth. You all know that? All right. China, a authoritarian communist country, they are not all that liberal, they don't tolerate dissent too much. They're 3 times our size. We have more people in jail than China does. Now, what is the correlation between high youth unemployment and incarceration in America? Well, it's pretty clear that we have kids here in New Hampshire, in Vermont, all over this country, hanging out on street corners, getting themselves in trouble, doing drugs, etc. So in my view, it makes a lot more sense for this country to be investing in education and jobs rather than jails and incarceration. Just think for a moment. Just think for a moment. We are spending about $80 billion a year, $80 billion, keeping people behind bars. It costs, varies, maybe $60,000 a year to keep somebody in jail. Think of the people that we can hire to work with those kids saying, no, you're not going to drop out of school. We are going to work with you. We are going to get you a job. You're not going to be hanging out on street corners doing drugs. And when we do that, we not only save human lives by the thousands, we also save taxpayers' money. That is the rational approach, and that's the approach we have got to go forward with. And when we ask ourselves, how does it happen that all over America, you got people working 2 jobs and 3 jobs, trying to cobble together enough income and health care to take care of their family? Why is that? And the answer is fairly obvious. And that is all across this country, millions of people are working for wages that are just too damn low. That's the fact. Now today, the federal minimum wage is $7.25 an hour. Well, get out your calculator and start multiplying. 40 times 7 1/4 times 52 weeks a year, and what you end up is not enough money. Forget taking care of a family, but to take care of one person. In my view, the minimum wage today of 7 1/4 is a starvation wage. It has got to be raised to a living wage, $15 an hour over the next several years. It is not a radical idea to say that if somebody works 40 hours a week in this country, that they should not be living in poverty. And there is another issue tied to raising the minimum wage, and that is that I sincerely hope that every man in this room will stand with the women and fight for pay equity for women workers. There is no rational economic reason, it just is based on a history of sexism, that women today are making 78 cents on the dollar compared to men. And when we raise the minimum wage to a living wage, and when we have pay equity for women, what we will also do is give some hope to millions of single moms all across this country who are struggling desperately to raise their kids with dignity, and that is what we have to do. It is beyond my comprehension, when you see single moms without a lot of money raising their kids and how hard they work. It is, quite amazing to me. In New Hampshire, you have, for better or for worse, a whole lot of politicians tropping through your state, right? And some of them are Republicans. And you have heard, no doubt, time after time, Republican candidates' concerns about family values, right? Family values, they just love families. They stay up nights worrying about families. Well, all of you know what they mean by family values. And what they mean is that women in America should not have the right to control their own bodies. I disagree. And what they also mean when they talk about family values is that our gay brothers and sisters should not have the right to get married. I disagree. I have 4 great kids. One of them, Levy, is here right now. I have 7 beautiful grandchildren, and Jane and I have been married for 27 years. And we believe strongly in family values and in strengthening families. But our views are a little bit different than the Republicans. And I start off, when I talk about family values, demanding that we end the international embarrassment of being the only major country on earth that does not guarantee paid family and medical leave. We are the only major country, only one. Now, what does that mean? What it means is that today in New Hampshire and in Vermont and all over this country, women are giving birth. And all of you who are parents know what an extraordinary moment in your lives that is. Unforgettable. It's also a pretty big day for the baby. But, and here's the but, if that mom and her family have sufficient financial resources, she will stay home and do what a mom wants to do, and that is to spend time with her baby, getting to know her baby, love her baby, bond with her baby. Dad will be there too, in what is the most important time of a human being's life. But if that mom does not have the money, if she is low income or working class, what she is forced to do after 1 week or 2 weeks is put that baby aside and then go back to work in order to earn enough income to take care of the family. Forcing women to separate from their newborn babies is not a family value. It is, in fact, the opposite of a family value, and that is why I will fight for the United States joining countries all over the world and guaranteeing at least 12 weeks of paid family and medical leave. If you get a call from a pollster, and the pollster says, what is most important to you? What is most on your mind? Generally speaking, what the American people answer is a four-letter word, J-O-B-S, jobs. And the reason for that is people know how volatile the economy is. They know that if you're an older worker, you could be replaced tomorrow by a younger worker at half the wages. They know that if you are a college graduate, it is really hard to find a job commensurate with your education. They know that if you are a high school graduate or a high school dropout, it is very, very difficult to find any kind of work at any kind of wages. So when you have real unemployment in this country of over 10%, youth unemployment off the charts, what I think is we need a massive federal jobs program to put millions of people back to work. We should not be firing teachers. We should be hiring more teachers. We should not be firing child care workers or firemen or police officers. We should be hiring more of them because we need them. But perhaps most significantly, we have an infrastructure in America, roads, bridges, rail, airports, water plants, wastewater plants, levees and dams, that in many parts of this country are crumbling. They need an enormous amount of work. When you got millions of people who need work and you got an infrastructure which is crumbling, common sense says we invest in rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure and create millions of jobs doing that. And let me also say a word about an issue that is not so sexy, doesn't get a whole lot of media attention, but is enormously important. And that is, not only should we be creating millions of new decent paying jobs, we have got to prevent the loss of millions of jobs as a result of our disastrous trade policies. You are looking at a senator and former congressman who has voted against NAFTA, against CAFTA, against permanent normal trade relations with China, and is going to help lead the opposition to this disastrous Trans-Pacific Partnership. And anyone who wants to take a hard look at the economy, and anyone who wants to know how we rebuild the middle class, how we lower our poverty rates, how we put people to work at decent paying jobs, has got to take a hard look at Wall Street. Wall Street, as all of you know, through their greed, their recklessness, their illegal behavior, drove this country into the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression. And millions of people are still feeling the impact of what Wall Street did. Now, here's what's interesting. The Congress, against my vote, voted to bail out Wall Street because they were too big to fail. In other words, if they went down, half the economy would go with them. Today, 3 out of 4 of the largest financial institutions in America today are significantly larger than they were when we bailed them out because they were too big to fail. You have the 6 largest banks in this country issuing more than 2/3 of all credit cards and over 35% of all mortgages. That type of concentration of wealth and power is not a positive thing for our economy. If Teddy Roosevelt, the old trust buster, were alive today, he would say, break them up. I agree with Teddy Roosevelt. That is exactly what we've got to do. Financial institution is too big to fail. It is too big to exist. End of discussion. Now, I am often asked, Bernie, you cover a lot of ground, you talk about a lot of issues. What is the most important issue out there? And it's impossible to delineate, just one issue. But I will tell you, one issue that is unique in that it impacts every other issue that we face as a nation. So let me be as blunt as I can be in telling you what I think most of you already know. As a result of the disastrous Supreme Court decision in the Citizens United case, the American political system, and I use these words advisedly, has been totally corrupted, and the foundations of American democracy are being undermined. Now, I wish I could sugarcoat it and not be as blunt as I am about this issue, but that is just the simple truth. Here in New Hampshire and in my state of Vermont, since the inception of our states, we have had town meetings. In rooms like this, people come together and they argue about the school budget and the roads and all that stuff, and then they vote. One person, one vote. That's called democracy from where I come from. But what we have now is the result of this Supreme Court decision, 5-4 vote, by the way, is the Supreme Court said to the wealthiest people in this country, they said, all right, guys, you already own much of the economy of America. We are going to allow you now to buy the United States government, and that is precisely what they are doing now. And what that means is that virtually every presidential candidate has a super PAC. And the reason they have super PACs is that millionaires and billionaires can spend unlimited sums of money on those campaigns. And then on top of that, you have the Koch brothers, the second wealthiest family in America, a family that wants to end Social Security, end Medicare and Medicaid, and the Environmental Protection Agency. Spending in this election cycle alone, the Koch brothers will spend some $900 million. That is more money than either the Democratic Party or the Republican Party will spend. When you have one family spending more money than either of the two major political parties, my friends, you're not looking at democracy, you are looking at oligarchy, and that has got to change. I have not made many campaign promises so far. Probably make them months ahead, but not so far. But there's one promise I want to repeat to you, and that is no nominee of mine to the United States Supreme Court will get that position unless he or she is loud and clear in saying that they will overturn Citizens United. Now, we are in a school here an elementary school here in New Hampshire, And I know that every person in this room, in New Hampshire and throughout this country, is very concerned about education, because we all understand that we live in a highly competitive global economy. And we all know, it doesn't take a rocket science to figure it out, that if we do not have the best educated workforce in the world, it is going to be very hard for our economy to grow and be strong and create the kinds of jobs we want for our kids and our grandchildren. And in that context, it is beyond my comprehension how we have a situation today where hundreds of thousands of bright, qualified young people who have the ability to go to college, who have the desire to go to college, cannot go to college for one simple reason: their family lacks the money. That is unconscionable, not only for those young people who want to make it into the middle class, who want to become engineers or scientists or doctors or teachers, but it is also unconscionable when we think about the future of America and our need to capture all of the intellectual talent that is out there. And that is why I will fight to make sure that every public college and university in America is tuition free. Now, I'm going to do that not just because it makes sense, not just because many countries around the world that we are competing against already do it, not just because 50 or 60 years ago in America that existed, but I am going to do it for the kids in this elementary school here in Seabrook, New Hampshire. And some of you are saying, well, what is he talking about? What does that have to do with a kid in the 4th grade here in Seabrook or in my home city of Burlington, Vermont? Well, I'll tell you what it has to do. I grew up in a family where my mom and my dad never went to college. And in fact, most of the friends they had never went to college. All over America, you have kids, low-income kids, working-class kids whose parents didn't go to college. They don't know anybody who did go to college. And the idea sitting here in the 5th grade that they might someday go to college is about as distant as the idea that they may go to the moon. It's not within their worldview. And what our job is today is to say to every child in America, if you're in the 4th grade, the 6th grade, the 8th grade, if you study hard, if you take school seriously, if you do well in school, yes, you will be able to go to college regardless of the income of your families. And that is revolutionary. That is revolutionary because it will give hope and change the attitude of millions of children in this country who then will know, who now will know, that if they study hard, they will have a good future. And when we talk about higher education, there is another issue that we have got to address, and that is the absurdity of millions of people in this country, young and not so young, who are struggling under horrendous levels of student debt. In my mind, it makes no sense for people to be carrying interest rates on their student debt of 6 to 8 to 10% when they could refinance their homes at 2, 3, 4%. And our legislation will allow them to do that. I've talked to too many people who are paying 20, 25% of their incomes in student debt, can't buy a car, can't buy a home, sometimes can't get married and have kids. That's pretty crazy. So we're going to deal with student debt as well. Now, when we talk about our responsibilities as human beings, as adults, as parents, there is nothing more important, in my view, than making certain that we leave our planet habitable and healthy for our children and our grandchildren. And I speak to you as a member of both the Senate Energy Committee and the Senate Environmental Committee in telling you that the scientific community has decided very clearly that the debate is over. Climate change is real. Climate change is caused by human activity, and climate change today, look at the wildfires in California right now, the heat wave in Pakistan. Climate change is already causing devastating problems in our country and around the world. And if we do not get our act together, the situation will become much worse in years to come. What the scientists are telling us, that if we continue business as usual, by the end of this century, imagine this, the planet Earth, our only planet, will be 5 to 10 degrees warmer than it is today. More drought, more flood, more extreme weather disturbances, more acidification of the ocean, more rising sea levels, more international war and conflict as people fight for limited natural resources, for war and for land where they can grow their crops. In my view, we have a moral responsibility to lead the world, to work with China, Russia, India, countries all over this globe in transforming our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energies. One of the themes of my campaign has been to beg the American people to think big, not small, to not get into the mindset in which we debate whether we cut education by 2% or 4%, to get not into the mindset of whether we do this little thing or that little thing, to understand that in the wealthiest country in the history of the world, if we stand together, there is nothing that we cannot accomplish. Let me give you one example. The United States of America today is the only major wealthy country on earth that does not guarantee health care to all people as a right. We are the only one. Now, I voted for the Affordable Care Act, and the Affordable Care Act has done a lot of good things. We have significantly increased the number of people who have health insurance. We've driven down the numbers of uninsured. That is a good thing. We've done other things. But at the end of the day, we still have 30 million Americans without any health insurance, and many of you who may have insurance have high deductibles and high co-payments. And yet, at the end of all of that, as a nation, we end up spending far more than any other country per capita on health care. In my view, the United States of America should guarantee health care to all of our people as a right. We can do it in a cost-effective way by moving toward a Medicare for all single-payer program. If every other major country on earth can do it, we can do it as well. And when we end up doing it, we will spend less per capita on health care than we currently do. I am the ranking member, that's the leader of the Democratic opposition on the Budget Committee. And I want to take a second to talk about values, which is what is reflected in the federal budget, which then goes to the Appropriations Committee. Some of you may know, but most of you don't, the nature of the Republican budget that passed the Congress. At a time when 30 million Americans still have no health insurance, the Republicans voted to end the Affordable Care Act make massive cuts in Medicaid, throw 27 million people off of health insurance. And when you ask them, as I do, I'm the ranking member, well, what happens to 27 million more Americans who have no health insurance? How many of them die? And how many of them will get much sicker than they otherwise would have? They have no response, not one of their interests. And you'll notice that in the recent debate, nobody talked about the fact that 30 million Americans have no health insurance and that millions more are underinsured. Not their concern. And then when you talk about the Republican budget, at a time when millions of working class families are struggling, figuring out how they're going to send their kids to college, Republican budget over a 10-year period cut Pell Grants by $90 billion. And then when you talk about the reality that millions of families in this country, where the breadwinner is making $8, $9, $10 an hour, can't afford to feed their families adequately, Republican budget cut nutrition programs, including the program for low-income pregnant women and their babies, by many, many billions of dollars. And then to add insult to injury, to tell you really what the priorities are of the Republican Party is, after cutting health care and education and nutrition, they provided over $250 billion in tax breaks to the top 0.2%. Brothers and sisters, those are not the priorities of the American people, and we will not accept them. And then when you have many Republicans, including a number of presidential candidates, coming before us and telling us that we have got to cut Social Security. Well, let me tell you, I am not going to cut Social Security when you got millions of seniors trying to survive on $12,000, $13,000, $14,000 a year. In fact, what we're going to do is lift the cap on taxable income. We're going to expand Social Security benefits, not cut them. As I mentioned earlier, as a nation, I believe we have made significant progress in ending racism in this country, but there is no doubt in my mind that we still have a very, very long way to go. And when I talk about racism, I am not just talking about a very, very sick person who walks into a Charleston, South Carolina prayer session and prays with people in the room and then takes out a gun and kills 9 of them because the color of their skin is different than his. And I'm not even talking about the hundreds of groups in this country, hate groups, whose whole function in existence is to promote hatred against blacks and gays and immigrants and Jews and Catholics and anyone who is different than they are. I am also talking about the sad truth that for many, many years you have had unarmed African Americans killed while in police custody. That is unacceptable, and that has got to change. We need major, major reforms in criminal justice in this country. And I was a mayor, as you know, in Burlington for 8 years, and I worked very closely with our police department, and the vast majority of police officers in this country today work hard. Many of them are underpaid. Many of them are overworked. Many of them have crazy schedules, which really impact their families. And they're trying to do their best under very difficult circumstances. But like any other public official, when a police officer breaks the law, that officer must be held accountable. And when we talk about creating the nation that we must become, in my view, we have got to understand that we have 11 million people in this country who are undocumented. And in my view, we should not be demagoguing those people. We should not be attacking them in vicious language. We should not be calling them rapists and criminals when the vast majority of them are hard working. And in my view, what we need to do in this country is move toward comprehensive immigration reform and a path toward citizenship. All of you know, I wish I could tell you differently, but it is the truth. We live in a very crazy, complicated, and dangerous world. Turn on TV and you see things that make you nauseous. Cutting off people's heads, turning children into sexual slaves, horrible, horrible things. And I will tell you, nobody has anyone who tells you they have a magical solution to these problems is not telling you the truth. But this is what I will tell you. And that is, I heard what George W. Bush and Dick Cheney and Don Rumsfeld had to say about Iraq back in 2002. I listened to what they said, I analyzed what they said, and I concluded they were not telling the truth. And that is why I voted against the war in Iraq. And I'm not proud or happy to tell you that if you go to YouTube or go to my website and read what I said back then about my fears about what would happen in terms of the destabilization of that region, a lot of what I said turned out to be true. Right now, we have another global situation, foreign policy situation. And that is, I believe that it's imperative that Iran not get a nuclear weapon. But I also believe that what we have got to do is to do everything we can to achieve that goal without going to war. And that is why I strongly support what the President and Secretary Kerry have negotiated. Can I guarantee you that this agreement will work? No, I can't. Nobody can. But I think a great nation like ours should do everything possible to resolve international conflict without going to war, understanding that war is the last resort, not the first resort. All right, you have been very patient. This is probably as hot back there as it is up here. And let me just conclude by saying this. We are the wealthiest nation in the history of the world. We are a smart people. We are an incredibly hardworking people. If we do not let some divide us up by whether we are black or white or Hispanic or Asian American, if we do not allow them to divide us up as to whether we are a man or a woman, whether we are gay or whether we are straight, whether we are born in this country or born somewhere else, when we stand together, there is nothing that we cannot accomplish. Everything that I have told you, this is not utopian stuff. This is stuff that exists in many cases in other countries around the world. But what we have got to do to make these things happen is engage in a political revolution which says that millions of our friends and our neighbors who don't vote, who have given up on the political process, they have got to get involved. They have got to start standing up and fighting not only for themselves, but for their kids and their parents. And that's all. That's what a political revolution is about. It's saying, no, I'm not asking you to spend as much time discussing the important issues facing our country as we do worrying about the New England Patriots. I wouldn't ask that of you. That's too much. But at least, let's reach out to our friends and say, you know what, we are fighting for the future of this country. Let's stand together. Let's make this political revolution. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, where's Phil? Phil, you there? Who else has a mic? Who does? All right, Levy has one. Phil has one. Well, let's take a few questions. Phil, you got somebody?
Hello, Senator Sanders. I first want to thank you for all the great things you've done for our country.
Thank you.
I'm a student in New Hampshire, and I'll be voting in the next election. And one of the things that matters most to myself and to a growing generation of younger voters, of millennials, is internet privacy. Yep. And I would like for you to share your thoughts about the National Security Agency and about the surveillance state.
Good. Thank you. Excellent question. You know, it's funny. In Vermont and New Hampshire, on issues of civil liberties and privacy rights, I think we feel very, very strongly about it, perhaps stronger than many other parts of the country. I have honestly heard people say to me, in terms of the NSA and so forth, they say, well, NSA is tapping my phone, they're listening to what I say. I don't really care. I'm not a terrorist. What do I care? I think that's a pretty sad statement. I think that privacy rights, the right to know that you can live your life, you can read whatever you want to read. That's your business, and it's not the government's business. And by the way, it's not just the government, it's not corporate America's business as well. They have more information. Okay. So I want you to know a couple of things. It is clear to everybody, or should be, that technology has far outpaced public policy. All right, you know that this little thingamajig here, this little cell phone, enables somebody to know exactly where I am at this moment, right? That's a fact. And between the government intercepting your phone calls and logging them, and between corporate America knowing everything you buy and maybe getting into your medical records and into your banking records, I think we have seen a huge invasion of civil liberties and our constitutional rights and American privacy. So let me just say this to you. Number one, you're looking at a guy, when it was not popular, this was after 9/11, I voted against the USA Patriot Act. And that wasn't popular. And I voted against the reauthorization of the Patriot Act because I believe, this is what I believe. Do I believe that terrorism is a real threat to this country? I surely do. There are people out there who do want to hurt us, and we've got to be doing everything we can to protect our people. But I happen to believe we can do that without undermining the Constitution of the United States and the privacy rights of the American people. Thank you for the question. There is an enormous amount of work that has to be done. Public policy has not kept up with technology. It's tough stuff because technology is exploding every single day. But in my view, the American people should be allowed to live their lives without the government and corporate America knowing as much about their lives as they currently do. Lev, where are you? Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Testing, test. Sorry. Ms. Sanders, I came from Pennsylvania yesterday to help with your office opening in Manchester and the one you're doing today. And before I go home, I just wanted to ask you a very important question. You talk about the importance of overturning Citizens United and that we need to think big to create a political revolution. Congress still functions the same way it did in the 1700s by having representatives, elected representatives who really represent corporate interests. We today have the technology to represent ourselves in the legislative process by simply logging onto a website and selecting legislation the same way we securely do online banking or taxes or everything else online. Do you think the key to a political revolution to overrule Citizens United is to bring Congress into the 21st century by allowing people to represent themselves directly in the legislative process?
I think it's a little more complicated than that, to be honest with you. I do believe that technology and social media and the internet have radically transformed the nature of American society. From a very personal point of view, my campaign would not be doing as well as it is if we were not communicating with many millions of people through social media. So I would answer your question in saying, I think we have got to expand the ability of the American people to communicate with their members of Congress. And as president, I would certainly do that. But I don't think that you can just run the government through the internet. I'm old-fashioned enough to believe we should be electing people to represent us.
I'm a little old-fashioned too, and I wanted to talk about the idea of disenfranchisement and helping people vote. And one of the suggestions that has been said could be done is to have a day off on election day so working people could get to the polls and vote, instead of having to give up their day's pay to be able to go vote. Another suggestion would be to investigate the motivation behind what I would call the disenfranchisement movement of keeping people from voting, yes, which seems to be taking hold in a lot of different places. And I'd like you to address that if you could.
Okay. You are right on both counts. We have, in fact, introduced legislation to make voting day a national holiday. We've done that. Look, we have one of the lower voter turnouts of any major country on earth. Now, a lot of reasons for it, but clearly in every way, we should try to make it easier for people to participate in the political process, not harder. Now, you were very kind in your second question about what we call voter suppression. It is not questionable, it is not hard to understand why certain states, i.e. Republican states with Republican governors and Republican legislatures, are in fact making it harder for people to vote. And I will tell you why, because I feel very passionate about this issue. You know, I run for office, and I got to go out to the people of my state and tell them what I believe and fight for votes. It has never once occurred to me to figure out a way to make it harder for people to vote because they might disagree with me. That's cowardless. And for all those governors and all those legislatures who are figuring out how you can make it harder for people to vote, low-income people, people of color, older people, students. You know, if you don't have the guts to defend your political ideas, get a new job. Okay, Lev?
Hi, good evening, Senator Sanders. Thank you so much for speaking today and allowing me to ask a question. This is a question regarding something that is very dear to me and I believe extremely important to the future of people in this country and across the globe. As a member of the stem cell and regenerative biology community, doing research at MGH and Harvard Med School, I was wondering what specific ideas you have for policies to increase awareness, education, and especially funding for scientific research and especially for medical research.
Good. One of the dismaying things that is going on in Congress right now, a Congress which is controlled by a very right-wing Republican Party, is they prefer to give huge tax breaks to the very wealthiest people in this country rather than invest in education and in scientific research. All right? So if we look at medicine in America, where we are today, what do we know? We know that if we don't get a handle and try to come up with some kind of effective cure or treatment for Alzheimer's, we're going to be spending unbelievable sums of money. We know we're seeing an explosion in diabetes and in other illnesses. So I think, obviously, both in terms of trying to save lives, prevent suffering, and by the way, let me throw in another issue, maybe not your issue, but an enormously, and that is mental health issues. We have a huge mental health crisis in this country. So investing in trying to understand the causation of those illnesses and figuring out a way that we treat them is the human and smart thing to do. And by the way, it saves us money. Last point that I would make on that, and that is I want everybody here to know that in America, we pay by far the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. 1 out of 5 Americans, you go to the doctor writes a script for you, you can't afford to fill it. What sense is that? So we have got to demand, and we have legislation in to do this, to make sure that the pharmaceutical industry in this country stops ripping off the American people. Okay, maybe a couple of more questions. Yeah, Phil, you got one?
Hi, how's it going, Bernie?
Good.
I just came up from Boston earlier today. I'm a student actually at Northeastern University. And one of the things that I'm most worried about is that my debt is going to be massive in 5 years. Every year, my tuition is $63,000. Yeah. And so for private institutions across America, tuitions are ridiculously high. And I really appreciate the fact that you're trying to make public institutions free. But I am incredibly worried about private loans.
Yep.
Their interest rates are ridiculously high. Mine is going to be 8.26%.
You're paying 8.2.
And I'm one of the lowest of my friends.
You're frozen at 8.2.
I'm frozen at 8.2.
Okay.
It can go up to the 25%, it says in the fine print.
All right, this is insanity. All right, let me just, what's your name, by the way?
Robert.
Robert. All right, thanks, Robert, for the question. I gather the question is what we're going to do about it. Everything being equal, you're going to leave school deeply in debt. You're going to pay an 8% interest rate. You're probably going to pay 25% of the income that you earn in your job when you leave school. It's going to tie your hands as to what you can do in your life and limit your opportunities. Is that right? All right. Now, I have talked in my state to a young woman whose crime in life was that she went to medical school and she's now a primary care physician working with low-income people, exactly the kind of doctors that we need. Her debt was $300,000. We have a major dental crisis in America, not enough dentists, not affordable dentistry. Talked to a young woman in Iowa, left dental school, $400,000 in debt. All right? There's a lot that we can do. In other words, well, let me just summarize it by saying you should not be paying 8.2% interest rates. Now, what sense is it? If you go out and you get a home and you want to refinance your home, you could do it at 2 or 3%. Why should you be stuck at 8 or 10%? What our legislation does is 2 things. Number one, it says to you, go out and get the lowest interest rates that you can. They'll be a hell of a lot lower than 8.2%. You're not going to be frozen. You got that? Number 2, the federal government should not be making billions of dollars in profits off of these debts. If we do those 2 things, it will substantially lower your total student debt, what you have to pay off. Now, people say to me, and this is an interesting point, they say, well, Bernie, this is, you want to make public colleges and universities tuition free, you want to lower his student debt, how are you going to pay for that? Well, it's an expensive proposition. It's about $70 billion a year, a lot of money. You know how we're going to pay for it? We're going to put a tax on Wall Street speculation. When Wall Street crashed, the middle class of this country bailed them out. It's Wall Street's turn to help the middle class of this country. Okay, Lev, where are you? Last question.
Hi, my name is Dilson. I came from Massachusetts, and as an engineer student, I would like to know, because right now there's a lot of jobs out there that they require you to have 2 years of experience for you to be able to get hired, and I would like to know what's your opinion on that. What do you think that we can do to fix that problem? Because a lot of students, for them to be able to get a job, they need to get, first of all, they got to go and get an internship. And a lot of those internships are hard to get because there's a lot of competitions and there's a lot of people going for those positions. I would like to know what's your opinion on that.
Well, let me tell you this on the issue of internships. In many ways, it is a modern form of exploitation. And I will be honest with you, and I did not fully appreciate that until a few years ago. Somebody educated me on this issue. And here's the story, and I think it's relevant to your question. If a person comes from a family that has money, that kid of that family can intern for nothing, make contacts, learn what he or she has to learn, right? And then they go out and they apply for a job, and they say, look, I interned here, and you get hired. But what happens if you don't have a lot of money? Are you going to be able to do an internship for zero pay? You can't do that. And what I learned from that, and I got to tell you, we changed our policies in Washington. We have interns in my Senate office. As I understand it, most interns in Washington are paid zero. We are now paying them, I think, the highest rates of any office, $12 an hour, for just that reason. Not the $12 an hour, they're going to, live high on the hog. But at least they can stay alive while getting their internship experience. And I think that's an important issue. All right, let me just thank you all for being out here this morning. It's good discussion. We have an enormous amount of work to do. I think we stand a very, very good chance of winning here in New Hampshire with your help. If we do well here in New Hampshire, and I think we're going to do well in Iowa, we are going to have a path toward victory, and we are going to make history, and we're going to make a political revolution while we make history. Thank you all very much.
I'm the leading state sponsor of terrorism.